I can't do this by myself. I need you, Charlotte. I need you, North Carolina. I need you to knock on some doors. I need you to make some phone calls. I need you to talk to your neighbors. I need you to give me your vote on November 4th. And if you do, I promise you, we will not just win North Carolina, we will win this election, and we will change the country together.
Yes, we can! Yes, we can! Yes, we can!
Final question. How can you escalate the war when so many people in this country seem to be against it?
I'm going to have to keep explaining. That's why I'm doing this interview with you. Scott, sometimes you're the commander-in-chief, sometimes you're the educator-in-chief, and a lot of times you're both when it comes to war. And we are in an ideological struggle, and it's a really classic ideological struggle. And Iraq is part of it. And it's very important for me to not only continue to explain why I believe we can be successful in Iraq, but explain to people that what happens in the Middle East will affect the future of this country.
I believe, myself, that the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and you have to make your own decision as to what the President knows, that this war is lost.
In 1982, Anwar Sadat traveled to Israel, a trip that resulted in a peace agreement that has lasted ever since. In the spirit of that type of bold leadership, would you be willing to meet separately, without precondition, during the first year of your administration in Washington or anywhere else, with the leaders of Iran, Syria, Venezuela, Cuba, and North Korea, in order to bridge the gap that divides our countries?
Should also point out that Stephen is in the crowd tonight. Senator Obama?
I would. And the reason is this, that the notion that somehow not talking to countries is punishment to them, which has been the guiding diplomatic principle of this administration, is ridiculous. Now, Ronald Reagan and Democratic presidents like JFK constantly spoke to Soviet Union at a time when Ronald Reagan called them an evil empire. And the reason is because they understood that we may not trust them, they may pose an extraordinary danger to this country, but we have the obligation to find areas where we can potentially move forward. And I think that it is a disgrace that we have not spoken to them. We've been talking about Iraq. One of the first things that I would do in terms of moving a diplomatic effort in the region forward is to send a signal that we need to talk to Iran and Syria, because they're going to have responsibilities if Iraq collapses. They have been acting irresponsibly up until this point, but if we tell them that we are not going to be a permanent occupying force, we are in a position to say that they are going to have to carry some weight in terms of stabilizing the region.
I just want to check in with Stephen Sixta if he believes.
Senator Obama, you both have now just taken this pledge on people under $250,000 and $250,000?
Well, it depends on how you calculate it, but it would be between $200,000 and $250,000.
All right. You have, however, said you would favor an increase in the capital gains tax. As a matter of fact, you said on CNBC, and I quote, "I certainly would not go above what existed under Bill Clinton, which was 28%. It's now 15%. That's almost a doubling if you went to 28%. But actually, Bill Clinton in 1997 signed legislation that dropped the capital gains tax to 20%.
Right.
And George Bush has taken it down to 15%.
Right.
And in each instance, when the rate dropped, revenues from the tax increased. The government took in more money. And in the 1980s, when the tax was increased to 28%, the revenues went down. So why raise it at all, especially given the fact that 100 million people in this country own stock and would be affected?
Well, Charlie, what I've said is that I would look at raising the capital gains tax for purposes of fairness. We saw an article today which showed that the top 50 hedge fund managers made $29 billion last year. $29 billion for 50 individuals. And part of what has happened is that those who are able to work the stock market and amass huge fortunes on capital gains are paying a lower tax rate than their secretaries. That's not fair. And what I want is not oppressive taxation. I want businesses to thrive, and I want people to be rewarded for their success. But what I also want to make sure is that our tax system is fair, and that we are able to finance health care for Americans who currently don't have it, and that we're able to invest in our infrastructure and invest in our schools. You don't propose tax cuts unless you are closing other tax breaks for individuals, and you don't increase spending unless you're eliminating some spending or you're finding some new revenue. That's how we got an additional $4 trillion worth of debt under George Bush. That is helping to undermine our economy, and it's going to change when I'm President of the United States.
In our country, I have found that this cooperation happens not because we agree on everything, but because behind all the false labels and false divisions and categories that define us, beyond all the petty bickering and point scoring in Washington, Americans are a decent, generous, compassionate people, united by common challenges and common hopes. And every so often, there are moments which call on that fundamental goodness to make this country great again. So it was for that band of patriots who declared in a Philadelphia hall the formation of a more perfect union. And for all those who gave on the fields of Gettysburg and Antietam their last full measure of devotion to save that same union. So it was for the greatest generation that conquered fear itself and liberated a continent from tyranny and made this country home to untold opportunity and prosperity. So it was for the workers who stood out on the picket lines, the women who shattered glass ceilings, the children who braved a Selma Bridge for freedom's cause. So it has been for every generation that faced down the greatest challenges and the most improbable odds to leave their children a world that's better and kinder and more just. And so it must be for us. America, this is our moment. This is our time. Our time to turn the page on the policies of the past. Our time to bring new energy and new ideas to the challenges we face. Our time to offer a new direction for this country that we love.
Let me be clear. We must be as careful getting out of Iraq as we were careless getting in. We can safely redeploy our combat brigades at a pace that would remove them in 16 months. That would be the summer of 2010, 1 year after Iraqi security forces will be prepared to stand up, 2 years from now, and more than 7 years after the war began. After this redeployment, we will keep a residual force to perform specific missions in Iraq, targeting any remnants of al-Qaeda, protecting our service members and diplomats, and training and supporting Iraq's security forces so long as the Iraqis make political progress. So let's be clear. Senator McCain would have our troops continue to fight tour after tour of duty, and our taxpayers keep spending $10 billion a month indefinitely. I want Iraqis to take responsibility for their own future and to reach the political accommodation necessary for long-term stability. That is victory. That is success. That is what is best for Iraq. That is what is best for America. And that's why I will end this war as president.
I had the courage and the judgment to say that I would rather lose a political campaign than lose a war. It seems to me that Senator Obama would rather lose a war in order to win a political campaign.
The Dow is expected to open down 300 points this morning, Robin, so that gives you an indication of how jittery the markets are. This is such a blow to investors, whether you're a big trader or whether you have a 401k, and we're waiting for the market to open in about 2.5 hours, so we'll see how this plays out. Around the world, both Asian and European shares are sharply lower. Asia's biggest stock exchanges in Japan and Hong Kong are closed, but every market open is in the red. India down 5.4%, Taiwan down 4.1%. Same story in Europe. German shares are off 3%, London down 2.7%, and U.S. stocks could open lower by 300 points, as I mentioned earlier. And this is all because we're waking up to 2 fewer investment banks on Wall Street. Lehman Brothers has filed for bankruptcy, and Bank of America is taking over Merrill Lynch in a $50 billion deal.
Lehman Brothers suffering a spectacular downfall. Its stock at one point this year sold for $67 a share. Right now it's trading at just $3.65 a share. CNN's Alan Chernoff joins us now with a closer look at what it means for your money. He's live outside of Lehman Brothers headquarters in New York. And Alan, that's where we saw those pictures all morning long of people yesterday literally packing up their life's work and carrying it out in a box.
Sharon, this is absolutely stunning. Wall Street has seen very, very few days like this. The mortgage crisis has now taken down 2 of the biggest names, the most storied names on Wall Street. One of them, Lehman Brothers, right behind me, the parent company of Lehman Brothers, filing for bankruptcy as the subsidiary.
We were with him last Thursday during one of the rockiest weeks in history for the U.S. economy, something that wasn't lost on the 6th-term senator.
Part of what a leader does is to instill confidence, is demonstrate that he or she knows what they're talking about and communicates to people. If you listen to me and follow what I'm suggesting, we can fix this. When the stock market crashed, Franklin Roosevelt got on television and didn't just talk about the princes of greed. He said, look, here's what happened.
Lessons of Vietnam. What do you see as the lessons of Iraq?
I think the lessons of Iraq are very clear, that you cannot have a failed strategy that will then cause you to nearly lose a conflict. Our initial military success, we went into Baghdad and everybody celebrated. And then the war was very badly mishandled. I went to Iraq in 2003 and came back and said, we've got to change this strategy. This strategy requires additional troops. It requires a fundamental change in strategy, and I fought for it. And finally, we came up with a great general and a strategy that has succeeded. This strategy has succeeded, and we are winning in Iraq. And we will come home with victory and with honor. And that withdrawal is the result of every counterinsurgency that succeeds. And I want to tell you that now that we will succeed and our troops will come home and not in defeat, that we will see a stable ally in the region and a fledgling democracy. The consequences of defeat would have been increased Iranian influence, it would have been increase in sectarian violence, it would have been a wider war, which the United States of America might have had to come back. So there was a lot at stake there. And thanks to this great General David Petraeus and the troops who serve under him, they have succeeded. And we are winning in Iraq, and we will come home. And we will come home as we have when we have won other wars and not in defeat.
2 minutes for how you see the lessons of Iraq, Senator Obama.
Well, this is an area where Senator McCain and I have a fundamental difference, because I think the first question is whether we should have gone into the war in the first place. 6 years ago, I stood up and opposed this war at a time when it was politically risky to do so, because I said that not only did we not know how much it was going to cost, what our exit strategy might be, how it would affect our relationships around the world, and whether our intelligence was sound, but also because we hadn't finished the job in Afghanistan. We hadn't caught bin Laden, we hadn't put al-Qaeda to rest, and as a consequence, I thought that it was going to be a distraction. Now, Senator McCain and President Bush had a very different judgment, and I wish I had been wrong for the sake of the country and they had been right, but that's not the case. We've spent over $600 billion so far soon to be $1 trillion. We have lost over 4,000 lives. We have seen 30,000 wounded, and most importantly, from a strategic national security perspective, Al-Qaeda is resurgent, stronger now than at any time since 2001. We took our eye off the ball. And not to mention that we are still spending $10 billion a month when they have a $79 billion surplus. At a time when we are in great distress here at home, and we just talked about the fact that our budget is way overstretched, and we are borrowing money from overseas to try to finance just some of the basic functions of our government. So I think the lesson to be drawn is that we should never hesitate to use military force, and I will not, as president, in order to keep the American people safe. But we have to use our military wisely, and we did not use our military wisely in Iraq.
Do you agree with that, a lesson of Iraq?
No, the next president of the United States is not going to have to address the issue as to whether we went into Iraq or not. The next president of the United States is going to have to decide how we leave, when we leave, and what we leave behind. That's the decision of the next president of the United States. Senator Obama said the surge could not work, said it would increase sectarian violence, said it was doomed to failure. Recently on a television program, he said it exceeded our wildest expectations, but yet, after conceding that, he still says that he would oppose the surge if he had to decide that again today. Incredibly, Senator Obama didn't go to Iraq for 900 days and never asked for a meeting with General Petraeus.
Well, let's go with some
Senator
of these things.
Obama is the chairperson of a committee that oversights NATO that's in Afghanistan. To this day, he's never had a hearing.
What about that
I mean,
point?
it's
That's
remarkable.
All right.
Which point?
Well,
you raised a whole bunch of them.
Well, no. All right, let's go to the latter point and we'll back up. The point about your not having been...
Look, I'm very proud of my vice presidential selection, Joe Biden, who's the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and as he explains, and as John well knows, the issues of Afghanistan, the issues of Iraq, critical issues like that, don't go through my subcommittee because they're done as a committee as a whole. But that's Senate inside baseball. But let's get back to the core issue here. Senator McCain is absolutely right that the violence has been reduced as a consequence of the extraordinary sacrifice of our troops and our military families. They have done a brilliant job, and General Petraeus has done a brilliant job. But understand, that was a tactic designed to contain the damage of the previous 4 years of mismanagement of this war. And so John, you like to pretend like the war started in 2007. You talk about the surge. The war started in 2003. And at the time when the war started, you said it was going to be quick and easy. You said we knew where the weapons of mass destruction were. You were wrong. You said that we were going to be greeted as liberators. You were wrong. You said that there was no history of violence between Shia and Sunni, and you were wrong. And so if the question is the judgment of whether or not, if the question is who is best equipped as the next president to make good decisions about how we use our military, how we make sure that we are prepared and ready for the next conflict, then I think we can take a look at our judgment.
Our market reporters are standing by. Bob Pisani, have you ever seen anything like no bell?
Yeah, that's a little strange here. We're down 1.7% here, a loss of 37 points or so. Apple shares are just getting hammered this morning.
We're down by between 3 and 4.5% generally across these markets. Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate. We're red everywhere, essentially, down by 4-5%.
We're down over 16%. Dow at the same time has fallen about 18%.
The stock market is now down 21%.
Because we're now down 43%.
What in the world is happening on Wall Street?
Two-year no yields went from 190 to 166 in the blink of an eye.
I have never live looked at the Dow Jones Industrial Board and seen a 600-point loss.
Who knows where this is going to end up? I mean, this is volatility we haven't seen, of course, since way before you and I were born, even before our grandparents, 1929.
So almost everything there completely wiped out. And the NASDAQ, everything and more has been completely wiped out.
The Dow traders are standing there watching in amazement, and I don't blame them. The credit market...
676 points down.
It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
We haven't seen anything like this probably since the Great Depression, I think it's fair to say.
We've had an 8-day losing streak in the Dow that in percentage terms puts it on par, close to the loss suffered in that crash in 1987, close to that percentage loss those 2 days in 1929.
Look at the move in Aussie yen just this week. This was 1 week, Maria. This market took 5 years to go higher. It's now down 40%.
What started in America last year has now spread to every part of the world.
This could be the most serious recession in decades. And that means life, as most Americans know it, is about to change, in some cases dramatically.
$22 lower, and that was September 17th, 2001, the day the markets opened after 9/11. So we have now broken that record. At this point, anything lower than 684 points is the biggest point drop that we've ever seen. Now, that said, Rick, I want to tell you that when you are looking at your investments and your...
A right or a responsibility, Senator McCain?
I think it's a responsibility in this respect, in that we should have available and affordable health care to every American citizen, to every family member, and with the plan that I have, that will do that. But government mandates, I'm always a little nervous about. But it is certainly my responsibility. It is certainly small business people and others. And they understand that responsibility. American citizens understand that. Employers understand that. But they certainly are a little nervous when Senator Obama says if you don't get the health care policy that I think you should have, that you're going to get fined. And by the way, Senator Obama has never mentioned how much that fine might be. Perhaps we might find that out tonight.
Well, why don't let's talk about this, Tom, because there was just a lot of stuff out there.
Privilege, right, and responsibility.
Well,
Start with that.
I think it should be a right for every American. In a country as wealthy as ours, for us to have people who are going bankrupt because they can't pay their medical bills. For my mother to die of cancer at the age of 53 and have to spend the last months of her life in a hospital room arguing with insurance companies because they're saying that this may be a pre-existing condition and they don't have to pay her treatment, there's something fundamentally wrong about that. So let me just talk about this fundamental difference. And Tom, I know that we're under time constraints, but Senator McCain threw a lot of stuff out there. Number one, let me just repeat. If you've got a health care plan that you like, you can keep it. All I'm going to do is help you to lower the premiums on it. You'll still have choice of doctor. There's no mandate involved. Small businesses are not going to have a mandate. What we're going to give you is a 50% tax credit to help provide health care for those that you need. Now, it's true that I say that you are going to have to make sure that your child has health care because children are relatively cheap to insure, and we don't want them going to the emergency room for treatable illnesses like asthma. And when Senator McCain says that he wants to provide children health care, what he doesn't mention is he voted against the expansion of the children's health insurance program that is responsible for making sure that so many children who didn't have previously health insurance have it now. Now, the final point I'll make is on this whole issue of government intrusion and mandates. It is absolutely true that I think it is important for government to crack down on insurance companies that are cheating their customers, that don't give you the fine print, so you end up thinking that you're paying for something, and when you finally get sick and you need it, you're not getting it. And the reason that it's a problem to go shopping state by state, you know what insurance companies will do? They will find a state, maybe Arizona, maybe another state, where there are no requirements for you to get cancer screenings, where there are no requirements for you to have to get pre-existing conditions. And they will all set up shop there. That's how in banking it works. Everybody goes to Delaware because they've got pretty loose laws when it comes to things like credit cards. And in that
Senator.
situation, what happens is that the protections you have, the consumer protections that you need, you're not going to have available to you. That is a fundamental difference that I have with Senator McCain. He believes in deregulation in every circumstance. That's what we've been going through for the last 8 years. It hasn't worked, and we need fundamental